Parents, what terrible mistake did you make that made your relationship with your kids worse? It's become clear to me that I will never be close to my son. I forgot about this from last year until I got a sad reminder yesterday. Here is some background information before we start this train wreck of a story. I have owned my own shop and store since I was 28 years old. I have been a mechanic since I was 19. I got married again a few years after my first marriage ended in divorce. She had a son from her first marriage, just like my present wife. At the time my grandson was about 4 years old, he thinks of me as his real father because his own father left him. My son from my first marriage lived with his mom, but I saw him a lot because he stopped by my shop on his way home from school. Sometimes he would stop by to say hello or look at the cars I had in the shop. My wife and her ex-wife got along great. Not once did it bother me when my son stayed over or came over for dinner, even though he lived with his mom. My dad bought me a black Chevrolet Chevelle SS when I turned 17. I've known how to take care of that car all my life. 90% of that car are still the same parts that came with it when I bought it. Since I was a mechanic, I didn't mind doing everything by myself. This car was usually in front of my shop or in my home garage. This car was also a hit with my son. He was always hungry for rides and knew everything there was to know about them. He had a toy car that looked just like the real one. You may be wondering what went wrong. 8 years ago, my ex-wife also got married again, but this time they moved to a different state because her new husband got a new job offer. After that, I mostly talked to my son on the phone and saw him maybe once every 3 to 4 months for a long weekend or 2 weeks. Over time, the calls stopped happening as often. He said he needed to focus on schoolwork, which made sense since he was a teenager. I didn't blame him. The boy I stepson was 10 years old at the time. My son dropped out of high school and went to college in a different state. I barely had time to talk to or see him after that. Things were not going well with my business at the time, and my wife got very sick with E. coli and kidney failure. Keeping everything together was hard, but we did it, and my wife is much better now. Now it's April 2019, and my grandson is 16 years old. He asked him because he always got along with my son. My son was busy at the time, but he said he'd be there in a few days. Because of all that, I hadn't seen him in almost 4 years, so I was glad he was coming over. This is where I really messed up. My brother got all A's in school. He got good grades in school, even when things were hard, and he even got into the university where he wanted to study medicine. Because my wife and I were so proud of him, I gave him my old Chevrolet Chevelle for his 16th birthday. His friends and he were both pretty amazed by it. It's a car that still gets noticed. Unfortunately, it changed my bond with my son in a way I didn't expect. It was his 16th birthday party. When I texted him a picture of my nephew with the car, I had no idea what would happen next. I texted my son back, "Is this a joke?" At the time, I didn't get it, so I texted him back, "No, why?" Soon after, he yelled at me to tell him it was a joke when he called me. He told me that when he was 10, I told him I would give him the car if he did well in school. I yelled back at him on the phone when he called me a bad dad who didn't care about his real kid. From that point on, rude things were said by both sides. Because I didn't understand, my wife told me to calm down and talk it out. After that, I did the worst thing I've ever done, and I would do it again if I could. Angry, I told my son that he didn't deserve the car and that he could call me back if he changed his mind. When the phone rang off, my wife and I got into a fight. She fought for my son. I didn't care at that time. People were mean to me when they called me a bad dad. After a few days, I tried to get in touch with my son, but never heard back. I believe he changed his phone number the next day after the fight. At the time, I didn't care about it. After 3 weeks, my ex-wife called, and she was so mad she hurt me. My son had supposedly graduated from college, and I only realized now that he didn't invite me. Already, my ex-wife thought it was odd that I wasn't there with my son. She was told right then and there what had happened. He also said that he was going to invite me to the graduation on the day he was supposed to go. Even worse, he was finishing as a car service technician and was said to be one of the best in his class. When I thought about it, I knew I was a bad dad. I didn't even ask him what he was learning in the 4 years I hadn't seen him because I was so stressed out. My ex-wife told me that he was sad and felt like he wasn't wanted, but my stepson didn't. She broke down in tears on the phone and said he just wanted to be a mechanic like me. It looks like he wanted to move back in with me, work in my shop, and take over when I retired. Everything in my life fell apart in front of me, and I still feel so stupid for telling him those things. My ex-wife wouldn't give me his new phone number or address because he didn't want to talk to me ever again. She also told me never to get in touch with her again. It's been over a year, and my wife and I have fought a few times over it. He gave the car back and agreed to do something else if it meant my son would come back. It's been 11 months since I last tried to get in touch with him. Before a few months ago, the last thing I knew about him was that he worked for a big car company. They refused to give any information about the people who worked there, which was a shame. I didn't expect to get a package from him yesterday. I knew it was from him even though it didn't have a message or return address on it. It was a box with a videotape, his old Chevrolet toy car, and a torn up picture of him and me on the car's top. He looked like he was about 7 years old when I watched the movie. I was fixing a car in the film. I started to cry around the middle because I understood why he sent me the tape. I told him while he was shooting, if you keep up your grades, the shop and my Chevy could be yours one day.